Yes, good morning and welcome back to the program. You're listening to Salam Media on the satellite radio broadcast, as well as out in Durban and Pietermaritzburg on the 90.4 FM and 105.6 FM frequencies of Al Ansar. This program is also live on our Facebook page, facebook.com, and you can catch it on our YouTube channel at Salam Media. Now, I'm glad to have on the line with me and on the stream the interim leader of the Democratic Alliance in South Africa, Mr. John Steenhuisen. And he has written an opinion piece saying that the President Cyril Ramaphosa, has to stop smashing the economy to death with a blunt instrument of lockdown and start putting his country ahead of his party. Good morning, Mr. Steenhuisen, and welcome to the program.
Salam alaikum to you and salam alaikum to the watchers and listeners today.
All right, so tell us the opinion that you've expressed, a blunt instrument called lockdown. What has the effect been on our economy?
Well, I think that during the period of the hard lockdown, and let me distinguish between the 3 weeks of the initial lockdown, which I think were the right thing to do, but I think that the continuation of the lockdown past week 3 has caused significant harm to the South African economy. We've lost in the region of 13 billion rand a day. We've lost many, many jobs, and many, many businesses have closed down during this period. We already had 10 million South Africans unemployed going into this crisis. We've got going to have many, many more. There's going to be business failure on a very, very wide scale, and there's a lot of data that's going to come out this week, which I think is going to make for very, very grim reading. And unfortunately, the extension of the hard lockdown has done significant damage to the South African economy to the degree where it may well actually impact on many, many more people's lives in a negative way than the actual lockdown itself.
But we've also seen that this has been a staggered reopening of the economy during this last 3 or 4 weeks. After the initial 3 weeks into lockdown level 3 and 4, we've also noticed as the results have come out from testing that particular period, the easing period, has resulted in very much higher daily increase in the rates of COVID infections. Do you believe we should have, after 3 weeks, just gone back straight into the economy as is, one shot, level 1?
No, I don't think we should have done that, but I definitely think that we should have allowed far more of the economy to open up, using PPE and using social distancing and screening, testing, tracing and tracking. I think that any business that could practice social distancing, the use of PPE, should have been allowed to open. Instead, we had government choosing winners and losers and deciding which industries could open and which could not. And as I say, that has had significant impact. Remember that a hard lockdown is never intended to kill the virus or to stop the spread of the virus. It is merely to buy you time to be able to prepare your health response, to be able to deal with the peak that is to come. I think it's also worth noting that many of these infections that we're starting to see arrive now actually occurred during level 5 and 4 of the lockdown, given the fact that there's an incubation period on it. So it just demonstrates that a hard lockdown is never going to stop the virus. It's merely a mechanism to buy you time. And the real tragedy about this is that although the hard lockdowns come at a massive economic cost for South Africa, the time was essentially wasted. We've added very few ICU beds to the national total, and many of the provincial health departments are nowhere near ready to be able to deal with the crisis going forward. So I think that the focus should rather be on managing the virus, which is going to be with us for the next 18 to 24 months, and managing it in a responsible way, and making sure that we use non-pharmaceutical measures, as well as ensuring that we are able to treat people and isolate them, test them. It's very, very difficult now to even manage the virus because there's such a huge backlog in testing. We're now sitting with nearly 100,000 backlog in the testing laboratory. If you're not getting test results back within 24 hours, it makes any form of smart lockdown or risk-adjusted model exceptionally difficult to do, because you're simply not able to isolate people before they go out and spread the virus even more.
Now, essentially, the Democratic Alliance is an opposition party, and on the other spectrum, you have the EFF also, posing itself as an opposition party. And both of these entities have come out and criticized the ANC-led government for its, stance and the road that it has decided to lead South Africa on regarding COVID-19. You are saying that we should have opened up a lot more quicker and, got the economy going. The EFF, on the other hand, is saying that the lockdown should be enforced in even stiffer basis, and we should be, completely cutting these networks to prevent the disease or virus from spreading. Is that essentially what an opposition party is supposed to do? I mean, just oppose without. Both are saying. In fact, you write about the ANC ignoring scientific, evidence or advice, and the EFF on the other hand saying also the ANC ignoring scientific evidence for its argument to completely lock down. Now, where do we find the balance in all of this, as the South African out there looking at all of these parties?
Yeah. Well, I think I'd just make the following point is that we haven't merely just criticized the government. That hasn't been our role at all during this. As I've said, we supported the governments in the 3 weeks of hard lockdown. It was the right thing to do at the right time because we just didn't know enough about the virus and what to expect from it going forward. The rest of the world was still going through it. But what we've now learned is that the science has moved, and we need to move with the science. If you don't move with the science, you get left behind and you end up making mistakes. I don't think that keeping the South African economy in hard lockdown was ever a sustainable strategy, given the fact that, and we saw it by week 3, many South African households, in fact, the majority of South African households were virtually food insecure and were unable to provide for themselves. We now have a situation where more than, as we sit today, 51% of South African households cannot provide food or sustain themselves. Our economy was in very, very bad shape going into the crisis. It is being dealt an even bigger blow now with COVID. And so what we've got to do is have the balanced approach of dealing with the twin threat to lives in South Africa of both a spread of the virus on the one hand, but also a grinding economic depression, which will have with it its own casualties, people dying of starvation, hunger, exposure, people are unable to provide for their families, to be able to send their children to schools or to be able to buy clothing, etc. So to my mind, it's a delicate balancing act, and it has to be managed by the science. I think we should be very worried by the fact that government has not released any of the data or the modeling. We're now onto our 8th PIA application to try and get this information because we want to see what informed government's decision to extend the hard lockdown. Surely if it was the right thing to do and you were moving with the science, it would be no problem releasing the data as many other governments around the world have done.
Mm-hmm. In your opinion piece, you write about the communists in the ANC are reveling in the opportunities for class suicide and the national democratic revolution, and that their stance is also just a watered down version of the EFF's opinion on the entire matter, and bringing down white monopoly capital. What do you mean? And just help clarify that point for us.
Well, I think that the point is here is that, and I think you're starting to see it emerging from a lot of the documents that are coming out now from within the tripartite alliance, where it looks like government is going to double down on the exact paradigm that got us into the mess in the first place. I mean, we've been in a technical recession for 6 years. Our GDP growth has been outstripped by population growth. We were in a full-blown recession once in 2018 and again in the first 2 quarters of 2019, and the last 2 quarters before COVID hit us. And that we got there as a result of policies that try and put the state at the heart of everything, rather than ensuring how you can empower citizens. And certainly, if I look at the documentation now coming out of the tripartite alliance, and particularly from the left of that, who see this as an opportunity for what Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma put in a piece that she wrote, a class suicide, where they would be able to reorder economy to give the state even more power. I advance the point of view that that's the wrong thing to do, because that's the exact paradigm that led us into the problem going into COVID, and why we've had very little room to move to assist both our citizenry as well as our economy during this time. And I think it'll be a big mistake if we were to double down on giving the state more power through nationalizing the Reserve Bank, through prescribed assets, through NHI, through all these other things that want to put the state at the heart of everything that we do in South Africa. I think it'll be a terrible mistake.
You spoke about, or the president rather speaks about consulting the various parties in Parliament before he comes and makes a State of the Nation address. And he's been very candid and open to the different views of people from the political parties like yourself. How open and how interactive are these meetings with the president, and are these matters raised there, and are they taken cognizant of in those particular settings before he announces any of these things?
Well, I mean, hats off to the president for interacting with political parties before these, but in every single one of them, it's been less of an interaction and less of an exchange of views and more of a government telling everybody what they're going to do and what they're going to announce. So right at the beginning, when the first announcement was made that the lockdown was going to be extended, I said to the president that this is going to cost the economy and you're going to end up in a very, very difficult economic space as well, and that many, many South African households just won't be able to sustain themselves over this. We then also came out with a risk-adjusted approach, our smart lockdown strategy, which we put before government, which would allow them to exit the hard lockdown much quicker and much easier in a much more coherent way. And we would have then ensured that we were able to, I think, do far less damage to the economy than we've done. But that's been bypassed now by events, because these models are simply impossible to implement if you don't have at least a 24-hour turnaround on testing. And that because the data has to inform how you move between the various levels. If you're not able to get data, it makes it very, very difficult.
Finally, the Western Cape is a province that's under the control of the Democratic Alliance. But in this particular area, we've seen the numbers skyrocketing. You are the epicenter of the country right now, accounting for 60 to 65% of all the numbers that are out there. And I mean, that's hard data. Poor people are saying that in actual fact, the Democratic Alliance doesn't care about them because the virus is now being allowed to spread rampantly and kill people. Do you really care about the population in that sense?
Absolutely. I mean, you'd be mad to be in government to not care about the population in a province that you govern. But what is happening in the Western Cape is merely a taste of what's going to come in the rest of the country. I think we had far more community outbreaks beforehand. And also the Western Cape, bear in mind, is testing at levels far higher per population than other parts of the country. What the Western Cape is also doing, what many of the other provinces are not doing, is going out to actually look for the virus. If you remember the slide that Professor Karim put up, where you go out and look for the small fires in the forest before you have to deal with an inferno, and that's precisely what the Western Cape has been doing. So the testing, tracing, and tracking is being done at a per population ratio far higher than anywhere else in the country. And when you go and look for the virus, you will find it. I think that you're going to see, I'm sorry, but the numbers in Gauteng, the numbers in the Free State, and the numbers in places like KwaZulu-Natal just don't add up. And I think there's something odd going on there. But I think we've been very open and transparent with the figures. But we will hit our peak, I think, before the rest of the country do in the Western Cape. But this is what's going to come to other provinces, and they need to be prepared for it. But certainly, the Western Cape has done everything it can possibly do to try and stop the spread of the virus and to be prepared to deal with it, from the 800-bed hospital at the ICC to the one that's been put up in Khayelitsha, to the efforts to test, trace, and track, which have been severely hampered by backlogs in test results coming back. I think that the visits by the various ministers there have shown that they are generally very pleased with the response. They obviously would like to see more doctors and nurses, and the province has set about recruiting those. But neither Mr. Mkhize nor the president has been able to.
Are you perhaps suggesting that in the other provinces like Gauteng and Free State that you mentioned, that numbers are being manipulated, that they are not a true reflection? That what exactly are you saying? Because that's
no. What I'm saying is that I don't think that the testing and the results recording there, I don't think that particularly the deaths that are being recorded in those provinces are being done according to the correct protocol. So what you should be doing is testing people who have passed away for COVID. That's not happening. There's no post-mortem testing for COVID. So people are dying of comorbidities, underlying comorbidities that I think could have, where in fact they could actually have been carrying COVID as well. But we just don't know because they're not testing in a post-mortem way. And I think that's why, if you have a look at the ratio of infections to deaths in the Gauteng, particularly, I think that there's something quite odd with the numbers there. And obviously, in fullness of time, the true picture will come out.
Mr. John Steenhuisen, interim leader of the Democratic Alliance, thank you so much for your time this morning, sir.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you very much.